Hey, look at you guys out there. Welcome in. Back again. It's been a while. It's great to see you guys. We're back for another episode of Woo Fantasy. Right here, rotoballer.com as usual. That is correct. Rotoballer.com, your one-stop shop for all your fantasy needs. Go over to rotoballer.com. Sign up for the premium pass today. Promo code WOO to get you a special discount at checkout. Rotoballer.com. So, here we go. Coming back in, first time in a while. Co-host actually in the show. Nick Heffley, how are we doing this evening, sir?
I'm good, man. You know, son Spencer's finally 1 year old, so he's allowing me to do podcasts now. So I'm back.
Back and better than ever. This is what we would like to say there. Back and not better than ever. I think I'll jump right into it. Ooh. The running back position, much ballyhooed on Twitter today as we saw Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, neither coming to an agreement before the free agent, the extension deadline today. They're going to be playing for they're going to be playing for that 1 year tag. And they're both unhappy about that. So, as we've seen so far on Twitter today, there's been a lot of running backs coming out of the woodwork and tweeting about their displeasure about the market for running backs right now. I've seen Derrick Henry out there. I've seen Jonathan Taylor out there. Austin Eckler has been fighting people tooth and nail this afternoon from what I've seen. How are you viewing this? Is this old man yelling at the sky type of a scenario with the running backs and how they're viewing things, or do you think they have a stance and that we're going to see some type of ample change in the coming years?
You know, I think the NFL in general. So the running back position, as we've talked about for a long time, look at the two teams that were in the Super Bowl this last year. Did either of them have a high draft pick at the running back position? No. Do you need that to be able to win a Super Bowl? No. So I think teams are, old school thought is you have a workhorse running back, you got to have the best back there. New school thinking is not necessarily that. These guys break down all the time. They don't play the full, 16, now 17 games in a season. So, the running back position in a fantasy perspective, in a reality perspective, is been devalued. And thus the money that these guys once were getting has done the same thing. These guys, guess what? If GMs and teams throughout the league are all having the same opinion, guess what? That's just unfortunate for you. So Saquon, Josh Jacobs, I probably would have signed the deal, and not held out. I think all this means, though, at the end of the day, is these guys are just going to miss training camp. They're going to go and be a little bit more fresh to start the year. To me, the news is a little bit ho-hum.
Right. And so I did tweet out yesterday when a lot of this talk, when the conjecture was out there, that I feel more confident in Saquon Barkley reporting earlier than I do Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs played on the tag last year and just blew the doors down, was the rushing yardage champion from 2022. Now he's repeated the same scenario. I can get his displeasure with it. But I think Saquon Barkley, I view him as more as a team type guy, wants to do right by the team. I think he's just trying to make a stance. So I feel like he's going to be the guy that's going to report sooner. But do you have any concerns about an elongated sit out of either two of these running backs?
I don't think so. Look, the window in both these guys is very short in terms of their career. Josh Jacobs may only have another 3 or 4 years left in him. Saquon's already had a major injury once, not really good 2 years ago coming back off the injury. So the window, guess what? It's short for these guys. So I think any kind of long extended absence is not going to be a good thing. Go get your money. Do like Le'Veon Bell did. Go get paid and then right off into the sunset. Very ho-hum for these guys. Saquon, I think, is trying to the talk is that he's going to take one for the team for all running backs out there. But at the end of the day, is he going to miss any time and miss a paycheck?
Yeah, no. Yeah, I don't believe so. I think, too, that's falling a little bit under the radar is the Tony Pollard situation. He did not come to a long-term extension either with the Cowboys. He's also playing on that franchise tag for the 2023 season. I pointed that out as well yesterday. I think that's one and done year for Tony Pollard as the lead dog for the Cowboys. Moving on next year, I think you're starting to see the NFL kind of catch up. We talked about it just a second ago. That just the ebbs and flows with how general managers are working the league right now. I think everybody's kind of getting to the point in fact that they think, hey, let me draft a running back this year. Let me play him, Katie bar the door for the next 2 to 3 years, get towards the end of their rookie contract. If they're performing up to their abilities, we're going to franchise tag him, and then we're going to let him walk. And I think that's kind of that's the state of the running back room right now when it comes to the NFL and how things are going. Does it suck for fantasy and what we do and projecting how these guys are going to be valuable for fantasy managers? Yeah, it kind of does to a degree, especially from a dynasty standpoint, because it really does put more of an emphasis on getting those running backs and playing them out through that rookie contract. Because after that, I mean, it's basically you're just churning out another set of running backs and going into the rookie well. We've seen that the last couple of years now. So how does that affect your possible strategy over the next few years, from a dynasty perspective? Are you going to start kind of putting more weight into running backs early in drafts and rookie drafts?
I mean, I think you have to. I mean, I know that's been in the Dynasty League you and I do that we started up 20 plus years now. In the past 10 to 15 years ago, you could get a running back and keep them into their 30s and be fine. But the way that the league is going right now, you really got to turn those guys out a little bit more. So when those guys start to hit that 27, 28, 29 mark, I had it last year with Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara was coming off a great year, headed in, but that age number was just sitting out there like a bad habit. And as much as I did not want to deal him off, I dealt him off for a first rounder. And look at what's going on now. Who knows what kind of year he's going to have this year, but he's already got some competition in there. You got Jamal Williams and you got Kendre Miller. The landscape of the running back position is going to change all the time. Teams look at Seattle's situation. Kenneth Walker out there, and everybody thinks, oh, he's going to have an amazing year. What did they do? They drafted Zach Charbonnet. Yeah. So I think you're sitting at that running back position if you're looking in drafts, dynasty or otherwise. And there's a lot of guys that are just coming in and being in the fold. There's so many guys out there who cannot run and be active for a whole 16 games. So why do you want that to be like that on your fantasy team? Like, you're going to have to churn and burn that position. So get a guy, trade him high value, keep churning and burning at that position, because the way the league is going right now, it's better to have that better quarterback, that better wide receiver, and keep churning and burning at running back. So.
Right. And I mean, that's what we've always kind of brought to the table on this podcast. And we've kind of really spoke to the into existence, so to speak, is that you really want to be ahead of the market and you really want to kind of use these guys as much as you can, as much as I hate to say that, trade them off while the value's high, really help build out your roster elsewhere. And I mean, really the way the NFL starting to kind of round into form now is the same way you want to really round out your dynasty rosters. Is you want to get these quarterbacks when they're young, build your team around these quarterbacks, wide receiver pieces that you can here and there, and fluctuate the running backs and, get guys at values where you can and kind of help you compete. But once they start to lose value, you need to kind of be ahead of the game, not selling guys off at pennies on the dollar.
Better to be a year early than a year late, especially at the running back position.
Exactly. So moving on to the other news and notes that have come down the pike the last couple of days, the long-anticipated signing of DeAndre Hopkins come to fruition yesterday. And where did he land? Was it the New England Patriots? Was it the Kansas City Chiefs? Was it the Buffalo Bills? No. He landed in the worst possible scenario when it comes to fantasy potential. Tennessee Titans, right down the road.
The place where old wide receivers go to die.
Exactly. It is Pet Cemetery.
Randy Moss, Julio Jones, now DeAndre. Here we go.
Yes, and also Andre Johnson. Let's not forget about that experiment back in the day too. Golly. So, yeah, it's definitely been a bad scenario when it comes to bringing in these over 30-year-old, often used and often injured wide receivers into the Tennessee state for the Titans here. So what's your original take? I put it out there yesterday. I kind of reworked my rankings that are available at rotoballer.com. Head over there to check out my rankings as well as the consensus rankings from the staff at rotoballer.com. Changed my rankings up on wide receivers. Of course, I did drop Treylon Burks down, dropped Chig Okonkwo as well, but still kind of playing a little bit with DeAndre Hopkins. I've got him right now at wide receiver 28. Don't know where I'm really comfortable on him right now as far as a value and a projection on him moving forward. How's your initial thoughts on that?
Initially, he definitely takes a little bit of a downturn. If he would have gone back to Arizona, if he would have gone to a different situation, granted, he comes into a Titans team where he is going to be the de facto number one, which he necessarily would not have been that in some of the scenarios that they were talking about out there. So at least from a landing spot perspective, him coming in at the one, it's a great spot. Unfortunately, like you mentioned, he's coming into a situation in Tennessee where the volume of the passing offense is not necessarily going to match up. Mm-hmm. So I personally have him ranked as number 26. He's at number 3. So I've seen some teams, Scott Fishbowl teams, have him as either their number 1 or number 2 wide receiver on their teams. Yeah, I can't buy into that. You're just not going to get the kind of volume that you need to be able to sustain that position. If anything, I think that Treylon Burks has a very slight upgrade as a result. Reason being, DeAndre Hopkins is going to command the attention. He's going to have the other team's best corner, maybe even some double teams. So that's going to leave Treylon Burks open. So I actually have bumped Treylon Burks up just a little bit, not a lot, but just a little bit. Okonkwo, well, he's still in the same spot he has been even previous to this. He's on the high end of the number 2 tight ends. I don't think it does a whole ton. If anything, I think the one thing that this move does is solidify Ryan Tannehill as an above average number 2 quarterback. I still don't know that I would necessarily want to have him just with the passing volume there. But to me, the whole move is a very ho-hum move. Unlike some people saying that Treylon Burks is going to be, this is death to his, value out there. I think the opposite. I think he's going to, especially in that division, I think he's going to have just a ever so slight bump up. Everybody else bump down.
Yeah, I think it's going to allow him a little bit of room to grow and allow him to kind of progress a little bit more as opposed to getting forced into the role. He's going to face a lot more single coverage than what was anticipated just 2 days ago. So I think that helps him from that term. But also, like we keep mentioning, it's the passing volume is the thing here when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. They've been towards the bottom, within the bottom 7 each of the last 4 years, I believe. So that's not going to bode well for a guy that's been a great target earner over his career like DeAndre Hopkins. Targets just aren't going to be there. So I think they're going to kind of spread the wealth just a little bit. I think it's going to help Burks in the long run more than it's going to help Hopkins this year. Because let's be honest, I mean, Hopkins is a guy that's been banged up each of the last, I believe, 2 to 3 years. So it's going to be something that will play a factor into this as well. Conditioning, and that's another thing. Does he have a chip on his shoulder because nobody wanted to pay him? Probably, but I just don't think that being in Tennessee is where you really want to prove yourself when it comes to production and trying to get that next paycheck.
Do you think the Titans are bidding against themselves?
They absolutely were. Everything that I read was there was no one in the ballpark of that 2 for 26 that they offered DeAndre Hopkins.
He's been hurt the better part of the last couple of years here.
He has, and that's something that a lot of teams were playing into with their offers that were on the table. But here's the thing that I kind of want to point out that's probably fallen a little bit under the radar is I think this actually helps, as much as I'd hate to say it, it helps Derrick Henry. The offense becomes more efficient than what it was just 2 days ago in our minds. Of course, my knock on Derrick Henry and really the offense in general has been the offensive line. They've lost a lot of pieces the last couple of years. I think that's going to be really playing a big factor into how well and how smooth this offense is going to run. So you're going to probably have a lot of inconsistent weeks in terms of production from all the key players in this offense. So that's something.
Sure.
I've got Henry in that 6-7 range still at running back. I can still kind of tinker with it and move him up because I think that, like I said, the efficiency of the offense grows, and I think it's going to help Mike Vrabel decide, hey, I'm going to run the ball even more now because my passing attack is a little bit more of a threat than it was.
We're in a lot of leagues to where running backs are very highly valuable. And over the last couple of years, Derrick Henry has been my guy. 2 years ago, especially, number 1 overall for me. Last year, even I took him in the Scott Fish Bowl in the second round and loved it. I mean, I was looking really, really good for the better part of the year until he got hurt. And that was the key with him, getting hurt. And now, just like you mentioned, the offensive line there is definitely not as good as it was a couple of years ago. So really, as I'm starting to do drafts, best ball is definitely where I'm starting to want Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Redraft, not as much, but definitely on a best ball. I mean, I think that's the perfect format for Derrick Henry. For Derrick Henry, I would go top 3 in a best ball format. I really would, because he's gonna ball out some weeks. He's got to have some weeks where he has he has a great matchup against the Jaguars. Oh, everybody in the world's gonna start him, and he's gonna run for 30 yards on 14 carries. Like, he's just not gonna be good. But those weeks he's on, he's gonna really be on.
Yeah, and that's something to kind of keep in mind. A lot of the underdog drafts that I've been doing over the course of the last couple of months, promo code WOO Underdog Fantasy to get yourself a matching deposit on Underdog. So go and do that, please. But I've been doing a lot of those underdog drafts the last couple of months, and what I've really seen, and it kind of really has held over the course of these 2 months, has been those wide receivers are flying off the board. Those first 5 to 6 rounds, you can still get a lot of great talent, a lot of depth at the running back position, 7, 8, round 7, round 8. I was in a couple of drafts that I'm doing slow drafts on earlier today, and I'm looking at rounds 8 and 9, and like Dalvin Cook's still there. And it's just, there's ridiculous value that's falling down the board. So that's kind of a scenario where, like you mentioned, you can grab a Derrick Henry, kind of start that hero build at running back, filter in the rest of your skill positions, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and then just start hammering those running backs later on in the draft. So that's definitely a good point there. I agree with that. So primary discussion for tonight's episode we wanted to kind of talk about was the quarterback rankings and kind of give a little bit of a preview heading into the 2023 season, as training camps are all of a sudden about to kick off. Rookies are reporting around the league here within the next few days, and training camps in earnest are going to be kicking things up by next Saturday. Everybody will be in camp and getting things going. So we are in that exciting time of the year. So wanted to kind of touch base on quarterback. Let's talk about some of our favorite guys to target in drafts. Talk about some of the rankings and how guys are playing out, guys you want to avoid. We could hammer the nail in and beat the drum all day long as far as the top 3 at the position, but I think it's something that we're splitting hairs at this point between, whether it's Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, or Josh Allen, which is the 3 that I have in that order when it comes to my rankings currently on RotoBaller. I think you can really fluctuate all 3 of those guys depending on, preference of those 3. How does the top 3 shake out for you right now?
So I think a lot really depends on the format that you're in, but I definitely think those 3 are the top 3 that you have. I would say Patrick Mahomes would probably be 1. Jalen Hurts for me is 2. Josh Allen is 3. And I think Josh Allen for me is slipping just ever so slightly into that second tier quarterbacks. I think he's on the tail end of that first tier. But before we even dive into that, let's just talk about the quarterback position in general, where I know for you and I, even 2-3 years ago, you're looking at, redraft leagues, we're waiting to round 7, round 8, round 9 to be able to grab those starting quarterbacks, to where I think you got to go and be a little more aggressive at going to get these quarterbacks. Like, if you don't get one of these guys in the top, for me, the top 7, top 8, you're severe in a 1 quarterback league. You are severely behind the 8 ball if you do not get one of these top guys. Like the difference, especially in a 6-point per touchdown format with these quarterbacks, is night and day. Like, you will not win your league unless you have one of these top guys. Gone are the days. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is the one guy last year that was drafted outside the top 12 at quarterback that probably would have won you a league. Those days of you finding the diamond in the rough at the quarterback position, I'll just wait and, get one of those guys around round 10 and I'll be fine. You can't do that anymore.
No, you can't. That's something that that wheel started turning a little bit. Let's even say as early as a couple of years ago, but it was really in earnest last year when not a lot of people were attacking quarterback early on in drafts. That was the winning formula last year. You know, getting a guy like a Jalen Hurts and getting him in that 5th, 6th, 7th round that you could get him in drafts last year paid big dividends for a lot of fantasy managers last year. Even, I mean, myself in particular, I had Jalen Hurts on my winning flex league team, the experts league that I do with SiriusXM. He was my quarterback. I drafted him fairly early in that league. And then the SBFFC, our big Southern Bluegrass Fantasy Football Championship that Nick and I are a part of every year in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Same format there. I went and grabbed Jalen Hurts. I believe it was in round 5, if I'm not mistaken, last year, and I was one of the top scoring teams in that league throughout most of the season. So I think that's going to be something now. You're coming into play here in 2023. You're going to see a lot of teams going after that particular format. You know, I'm seeing a lot of ADPs right now. You've got, I believe, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen both coming off 17, 18 off the board overall. So right there in that mid-round.
Never heard of a couple of years ago. Never.
Yeah, you would never see these guys touch that early a lot. And these, you know, some of your drafts that are, I mean, even when you get into late August, when you're really putting in those final drafts, you're still not grabbing quarterback early. But like you mentioned, I think that's the key to things right now. But, and that was something too, when we get into talk about the Scott Fishbowl draft, is that now you're going to get into the scenarios that, do you want to zig when others are zagging to a degree, is because you've got different strategies coming into play. And if everybody's going in and grabbing a quarterback in round 3 to round 4, is that an ample opportunity for you to go in and grab other skill position players to fill out your roster and try to play it that way? That's kind of something to keep in mind as well.
And we'll get into that. One of the guests we're going to have later, Alex Gilstrap, my coworker there, he picked third and he went Travis Kelce, and he didn't pick a quarterback till round 5, whereas almost every single other team in that entire 12-person draft went quarterback round 1, if not round 1, round 2. So it's really interesting to see what some of these teams are doing and how they're building their stack. And, you know, for when we dive into it a little bit later in the Scott Fish Bowl, you know, draft round is not necessarily important, but one of the things I think, and what I always do when I look at some of these drafts in the different formats, in the scoring format matters a little bit, but look at the ranking of where some of these guys go. So you may see Jalen Hurts, like he was in ours, first overall. So I'm more paying attention to that and ADP and where these guys are going, not necessarily, oh, this guy went the first round, I got to give him in the first round. Well, no, pay attention and rank these guys accordingly to where some of these guys are going. Use that for your home drafts and adjust the rankings properly to what your league uses as a scoring format.
Yeah, and that's, like you mentioned, the scoring format is big. You have to really know what you're getting into with the scoring changes in your league, things like that. Be adept to what you need as far as you build when you're building your rosters. Is like, you know, there's a couple of leagues we've mentioned on this podcast over the years that we've done. You know, our local leagues. We do leagues with a lot of our kind of the guys we've been friends with for years. You get 5 points for every yard rushing. So those leagues, you have the quarterbacks like your Josh Allen, your Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jacksons. Those guys are flying off the board fairly early because of the rushing upside. Whereas opposed to you get into those 4-point, where for passing touchdown type leagues with not a lot of rushing upside as far as scoring bonuses and things like that, then you start to see a little bit more of kind of an even playing field, and it balances out through the rankings and stuff. So that's something to kind of keep in mind with. Good point there. Really be adept as what your scoring format is. But kind of looking at general scope as far as my rankings are, I've got them up on the screen right now. Top 10, like I mentioned, the top 3, Mahomes, Hurts, Josh Allen. I've got Joe Burrow at 4, Justin Fields right now at 5, Justin Herbert at 6, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, Tua Tagovailoa, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, and then Kirk Cousins, rounding out your QB1s as we head into training camp right now. Any thoughts, difference, guys you might want to move out of that realm of QB1 and into?
You know, I want to make a note before we go any further. I think, you know, we talked about just a little bit Josh Allen.
Yep.
being in that top rank. I would in my tier ranking system, I have him in tier 2 along with Joe Burrow. I think Joe Burrow is strong enough to be in this top tier. 3 amazing receivers, 2 top 12 receivers for him. That's an offense that throws the ball. Joe Burrow is a guy that is a target of mine, definitely in most drafts. So I don't know how big of a thing that is to be able to move him into that, but I would definitely rank Joe Burrow in a tier with Josh Allen by himself. I think to me, Hurts and Mahomes have definitely established themselves at that top tier. Josh Allen has too, but I think Josh Allen, with the receivers he has, is definitely taking a little bit of a step back in terms of the weapons he has himself available. But very interesting from you with just my boy Justin Fields is number 5. Do explain there, because I'm not used to such musings from a Cowboys fan here.
Well, I mean, it's from an objective mindset. Well, I mean, we saw last year he finished as QB6 in fantasy points per game. And that was with a rare, just little volume as a passer last year. And we all saw, the trade for DJ Moore in the offseason. We're expecting, it's a second year under the system, another year to progress. They've added those weapons. I think there's going to be a little bit of regression when it comes to his passing statistics this year. But we're not going to rule out that rushing upside either. So I think that's, putting him there in that 5, 6, 7 range. I mean, you're banking on where his floor was last year. Me putting him at 5, I'm allowing for a little bit of a step up with that progression, like I mentioned. So I think there's still some of that room to grow. We're looking at a guy that's similar to last year with Jalen Hurts. You had a lot of people that were somewhat kind of iffy on Jalen Hurts, didn't rank him accordingly. I believe I had him as high as 3 as my quarterback rankings heading into the year. So I was really high on him coming into the season. So that's a similar situation here with Fields. But now to double back into Josh Allen talk, what you mentioned and kind of some of the concerns with the weapons around him, Gabe Davis is a little bit of a letdown last year. A lot of people were excited about him. And that was, if you go to rotoballer.com, I had my ADP duel go live on the site earlier today. I put Stephon Diggs against A.J. Brown in their duel where they're going literally side by side in drafts right now. And I kind of got into a little bit of Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen's talk with that article. I think something that kind of keep in mind with Josh Allen this year is if he does kind of become a little bit stagnant and does not progress forward, I think you're going to probably see it's more that they've got a hammer in that backfield now with Damian Harris to take away some of those goal line rushes to try to allow Josh Allen to stay somewhat healthy and not put his body at risk on those, goal-to-go situations. Is that going to suck from fantasy managers that are hoping on those touchdown runs from inside the 5? Sure. But I think that for the health of the quarterback and for the betterment of the team, I think that's something that you can kind of keep in mind with Josh Allen this year.
Sure. I would say the one, I like your rankings. You got 2 a little bit higher than, most of the crowd, which I actually tend to agree with. I think for 2, it all comes down to me an issue of health. I heard a little bit earlier. Right. I was listening to Fantasy Sports Radio on the way home. I think in the words that I heard, it's asinine to consider that you could have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as top 12 wide receivers and not have Tua Tagovailoa as a top 12 quarterback. It doesn't make sense. And that's exactly 100% correct. The one disagreement I think I have with you, I mean, obviously we could nitpick on, a spot up or down here and there. But I would 100% include Daniel Jones in at that top 12 on the quarterback position. I like Kirk Cousins. He's fine.
I've got him as a guy that's really right there on that fringe. And the guy that I've really thought about kind of moving around the board and dropping back somewhat is actually Dak Prescott. As much as I hate to say it, I've talked about it ad nauseum through the entire offseason at this point in time, is the change in offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore's gone. Mike McCarthy's going to be the play caller for the Cowboys this year. But also we're bringing in, just every bit and piece of this offense looks like it's going to be run heavy. Obviously, we don't have that veteran, bigger back behind Tony Pollard right now, but of course,
like you said,
Zeke Elliott's coming back. I think it's just a matter of time.
What do you think about
before he
Leonard
comes
Fournette? Do you
back.
think Lenny's maybe Lenny's there instead of Zeke? Like, I think one of those two
Nah,
is the guy there. You don't think so?
I don't. Fournette, Fournette to me seems like if there's going to be a landing spot for Fournette somewhere, I've kind of had him and Kareem Hunt as a guy that I've tabbed going to Cincinnati and the Bengals and kind of playing that third down role. That's kind of been where my mindset has been with those two players, but we'll see how that shakes out when we get there. But like you mentioned, I mean, Daniel Jones, he's another guy that's kind of ascending, has that rushing upside. They've got pieces around him. I would not argue if you take him as a QB1, especially if you're in a weight.
Jones. I've been, as well as I have, I've been a Daniel Jones truther for 2 years now. That man can run the football. Look,
it's got to kick in at some point.
If you are going to wait on quarterback, look, they've added a receiver. Darren Waller's there. The man can run the football. Like, if you're going to wait, or especially in 2 quarterback leagues, my coworker Alex Gilstrap's going to be on here in a couple minutes. We started a work league, a dynasty league up at Superflex. I was hopping on Daniel Jones round 3 as my backup quarterback. Well, not a backup quarterback. It's my Superflex quarterback. It's my second quarterback. But young guy runs the football. How many of these guys going down? You go down below there on your list. There's not a lot of guys that are going to run the ball. It's your typical quarterback.
Richardson.
Before we get in,
a little bit of Wilson.
So take Daniel Jones out of it, because obviously we're going into Daniel Jones.
Right.
Who out of the rest of those guys, who do you think is a guy that can come up from on your list, 14 down? Anybody on your list that you think they could come up and be a top, let's say, 8 quarterback on the year?
I have 2. One is a complete wild card. And one is kind of
give me one. Okay, I'm going to give you 2.
Okay. One, the safe play, I think, to move up and be in that kind of top 10, top 8 discussion, potentially, Jared Goff. I think the improvements of that offense, Jahmyr Gibbs in the backfield as a kind of that can-do-it-all weapon that they're going to design him to be. Jameson Williams, when he comes back from suspension, I think he's a guy that he can just add a whole different dimension to that offense. So I think that they can really kind of build upon the passing attack and the route trees for this offense and be more not as one-dimensional as we've seen the Lions be in previous seasons. And I think that they can kind of attack down the field a little bit more, and that helps a guy like Jared Goff build a lot of potential in my eyes. But then the long shot, the wild card is Jordan Love. I like Jordan Love. I think he's in a complete unknown at this point in time. Small sample size, has looked good. He looked good in that game against Philadelphia last year when he came in. I think there's a small glimmer with the offseason and how things are kind of playing into this scenario. As much as you want to hate it as a Bears fan that they've moved from quarterback Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to potentially another good quarterback under center there, I think that he's a kind of a long shot guy that I've got. And if I'm in a situation where kind of similar to last year, if I'm drafting a quarterback early like a Jalen Hurts, or if I'm getting a Joe Burrow early last year, I usually look for those really large upside type of quarterback 2s to get on my roster. Jordan Love's a guy that I would target late in drafts.
I'm shaking my head because you and I are targeting the same freaking guy as we do every freaking year. So now all I'm going to be thinking about every draft we do is how I'm going to target Jordan Love as I did in the Scott Fishbowl draft. And of course he got taken before me in the format, but no, I think he is definitely the one guy to a lesser extent, maybe in Brock Purdy. And I think his ceiling all depends on health, but they've got 3 quarterbacks there in total. But I think Jordan Love, you got the offense, you got the running backs, you got the line, you got the receivers, you got a spot that is set up for Jordan Love to be successful. And I'm a Packer hater. I hate the Packers, but guess what? There's Packer hate and there's fantasy football glory, and I'd rather be great at fantasy football. So Jordan Love, unfortunately for me, is also that guy that can make that big move up and be in those top 10, top 8 guys at quarterback. So
right, yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that's what obviously we're right on the same page with that. But we've also been doing fantasy together for what's 27 years now. So so not shocked when it comes to that. So before we kind of switch over and kind of get in and talk about our Scott Fishbowl drafts and bring in the guests, guys that you will avoid at current cost, guys that are there that you're really not interested in drafting, or they're going a little bit too high and you want to kind of steer clear of.
Sure. Normally my answer every year is Lamar Jackson, and shockingly enough, this year it is not. So, so Anthony Richardson is going way too high for me at current stock. His rushing ability, sure, is nice, but there is no way that I'm taking him over Young, over CJ Stroud, going that high. What is the big difference between those guys and Anthony Richardson? I watched Anthony Richardson at Florida. He was not as good as those two other guys. He may have a little bit more of an alpha receiver in Michael Pittman. He may have a little bit better rushing attack, but that, for me, there is no way I am taking him that high in drafts. Geno Smith, there's no way he can do what he did last year again, right? There's no repeat. Like I would be shocked. Like I've seen Geno Smith, and I was shocked as anybody last year at Geno Smith and what he did. But I cannot fathom him putting together that same effort 2 years in a row.
It's a tale of two halves for Geno Smith last year too. That's the thing. The last 6 to 7 games last year, you really kind of saw defenses turn the tables on him. He did not perform as well as he did in the first 6 to 7 games last year, where he really built up a lot of that fantasy points per game stock.
But I am saying that those two guys are probably – those two guys, along with Aaron Rodgers, are probably some guys that I am not going to be touching. I would rather wait on my board and go get that Brock Purdy, that Jordan Love, Jared Goff, and to a lesser extent, and I'll go ahead and say it now, I got him in, and we're going to talk about him later because he made it to my team, and he's a big sleeper of mine this year. Kenny Pickett, I think, is going to have a great year. He's got a lot of weapons to be able to go there. You got him super low, and I love it because that means I must be doing something right. But in terms of your question, guys, to avoid Richardson, Geno, Aaron Rodgers, you have them right there, back to back to back. Those are three guys I am avoiding like the plague this year.
Yeah, I think for me, I touched on Dak Prescott. As much as I hate to say it as a Cowboys fan, I'm not really thrilled with how that team is kind of shaping up from a passing standpoint right now. Yeah, we did bring in Brandon Cooks. There's possibly some upside there, but I think, like I said, there's going to be a little bit more focus on the ground to attack this year. So I think where he's going in drafts is probably appropriate, but more than likely I'll already have my QB1 by the time he's coming off the board. And I think we're starting to get to the point where Deshaun Watson is catching a little too much hype. I think once we need to get into training camp here in the next couple of weeks, start to kind of see how things are playing out. Because, we saw a couple, last month or two ago during OTAs, all the talk was Elijah Moore, guys making catches left and right, how great this team was looking. Let me see it on a sustained basis with Cleveland, who's perennially not really been a team that provides great quarterback play from a fantasy perspective, similar to the Bears prior to Justin Fields. It's kind of, you get into those teams that are in the Midwest up north, and the weather kind of starts to play a factor in it, not really breeding to be a type of team to where it's really a throw the ball all over the field kind of a thing. That's where I'm kind of a little bit
exception to that. Brett Favre would take exception.
Aaron Rodgers is the exception to the rule. Let's be honest right there.
What the hell? What am I doing?
But those are the two I like.
I think Deshaun Watson is he's my number one quarterback in Scott Fishbowl. He was more of a product of the spot that he fell in the draft and me loving him. I honestly don't know what to think of Deshaun Watson. I really don't. Like, I'm capping on his name and the situation he's in. Historically, it's not been a great spot for quarterbacks, but we'll see.
Right. Yeah, it's exactly a we'll see situation when it comes to that. So that's kind of how things are shaking out. Guys lower down the board, I'll just throw them out there real quick. Just your woo or boo on a couple of these names, 2 or 3 of these names. Sam Howell.
Boo.
I'll give him a little bit
of a woo. Jacoby Brissett. I don't know.
Ryan Tannehill after the trade for DeAndre Hopkins.
Meh. No, we'll go boo.
Go boo. Okay. I think based on where he goes in drafts right now, he's a woo for me. And last but not least, let's say Desmond Ridder, local product.
Boo.
Okay, I'm with you there. Boo.
I think
too much of a running offense.
With each of those guys, the quarterback position is not necessarily settled. Like, you've got backup quarterbacks that may even be better than them, and I feel like the Titans they may not be in as much of a rebuild mode as possible. But Will Levis is going to Will Levis plus 1.5 games this year, plus or minus.
0. He's not touching the field.
You don't?
Not at all.
I think he's touching. Yes.
No, that move.
I think the last game of the year is 1, but you got to see which direction we're going. I think he's going to play more than that. Absolutely.
That move for DeAndre Hopkins breathes of just absolute desperation. The Titans feel like we're going to win this division. We're going to playoffs again. Ryan Tannehill's taking us back to greatness. And I think that they're going to ride on Tannehill and hope that they can turn the team around with this acquisition. And I think
and when that doesn't happen, we'll see. And when that doesn't happen, we'll see Will Levis.
Yeah, but let's see if Malik Willis, who's been talked about as outperforming Levis and OTAs so far, let's see how that shakes out too. So, moving on, we're going to bring in some of the guests here into the stream. Got in Mr. Stephen Davis, Commissioner Breeze, Jeff DiMatteo, and then bringing in the rest of the guys here.
Wow, I'd have brought Jeff in a lot earlier with that Montana jersey. Dang.
How about that? Got Emily Saw in there, and then also the aforementioned Alex Gilstrout that works with Nick with Braves, unfortunately.
The hair is there, man. We didn't see those luscious locks at the draft, and you had the hat on. I love it.
Man, I wouldn't wear a hat with hair like that.
Hey, I do want to set the floor first and foremost before we move on to anything. We just got done with the topic. Set the foundation for Emily, the big Titans fan. How do you feel about DeAndre Hopkins? We talked about it in the chat yesterday. There's a little bit of back and forth, but
yeah. I mean, we're excited. I think it's time that we can make the playoffs. I think it's needed. I think it's like, think about the money. Like, think about DeAndre Hopkins and like all the catches he's going to make. He's going to get like $3 million more if he gets 10 touchdowns. Like, he's going to do it. So
the very supportive Titans fan.
Blue Kool-Aid is getting drink.
So, but we wanted to kind of bring a few of the guests in here, talk about, we did the Atlanta Live draft just last weekend down there at the Battery in Atlanta. Scott Fishbowl 13. Obviously, we're done with our draft now. Can't say the same for a lot of people that have started their online leagues the Monday that we got kicked back up. So, swing over to Jeff. Jeff, how are you feeling? Tight end strategy, you ran the board with tight ends last year. That was not the case just this year.
Hold on, before you get into that, there's two separate Atlanta Live divisions. So
true.
The division that I ran is the shirt that Brandon is wearing is the Waffle House division. Alex had the 3 pick. I think Jeff had the 6 pick, and I had 9. So 369 is represented here. Brandon was in the Brandon was in the Coke division along with Emily and Steven, Commissioner Breeze there. So just to set the table real quick. All right, Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks for the clarity there. I'm glad we could clear that up for all the viewers.
I'm sure it's all the people in our league is the only viewers, so yeah.
Say that.
I tried to get some of my
everybody's watching. Hi, Scott.
So, last year, bully tight end, you alluded to that already. 4 of my first 5 picks for tight end. The board just didn't break that way. I was hoping to get an elite tight end or 2 in those first 10 rounds, and the board just wasn't coming to me that way. So I just kept hammering wide receiver. I went out quarterback, and then just kept smashing wide receiver until it got to the point where a couple of running backs and a tight end finally the value showed themselves. Didn't mind taking a guy like Greg Dulcich to be my tight end 1, which is a far cry from all the guys I had last year. But I feel like I've got a pretty serious advantage at my 3 wide receiver spots and potentially a flex spot with taking 4 guys that'll probably all be in the top 28 at wide receiver.
Yeah, definitely. It's a change of strategy from a year ago, like you mentioned. That's the thing is you really don't want to kind of go in and do the same thing year after year, especially if you learn from one year over to the next. Steven, how was that? How did things shake out for you in our Coca-Cola division? How do you feel how your draft went?
Overall, I like my team. I feel like it's pretty balanced across the skill positions. Some slight concerns at quarterback. I'm really want to share that optimism that Nick shared about Kenny Pickett. If he can come through just a little bit, I think he can really propel my team to do some good things this year. For Scott Fishbowl, but ideally, I wanted to take Deshaun Watson with my second round pick, but Derek took him. So I kind of had to pivot and go a different direction. I mean, Bijan is a nice consolation prize in any draft where you can't get the guy that you want to get. So I was pretty happy with that selection. But I did get Derek back a few rounds later with the Amari Cooper pick because I figured he was looking for somebody to he needed a receiver, and he was looking at that potential stack. And I told Emily, we were sitting right side by side each other. So I'm about to snipe him and take Amari Cooper. And I said, I'm about to make somebody mad.
You did. You did.
That's definitely the case. I'm looking at the board there.
Steve and I have a ton of the same picks here, so he and I are going to be like this the entire year. And I love what you said about Deshaun Watson, because if you like him that much, and I've got him as my one, I'm feeling really good about my drafts. So.
Right. Yeah. Steven he was from the 10 spot. Nick, you were from the 9 spot. So it's kind of a similar area where you're building your rosters from. Obviously, yeah, Steven went Justin Herbert, Bijan, Tony Pollard, Waddle, Waller, Cooper, Judy, David Montgomery, which I love that pick where you got him in the 8th round. I think there's a lot of upside with that pick, especially as you're running back 3 in the scoring format. I think that's going to be somewhat dangerous. So it's a good start. Definitely like how the build was as we got into those later rounds. How do you feel about how the board was shaking out in these later rounds? I know for me, there was a lot of frustration in some of these later rounds of how a lot of the players were coming off the board a lot sooner than I was anticipating.
Yeah, it's funny because as we were, on the back half of our draft board, picks 11 through 22, I was like, I still see a lot of good names out here, as far as building depth, for me to be able to get Tyler Algier and Jared McKinnon where I got them, it's a ton of upside for where they went. I could see a scenario where both of them guys can vastly outperform where they got picked at. And, you have some other guys in the well, I know Ronnie's not here, but that's a character. Oh, man. He said, I hate this team, And when we was picking in the later rounds, I can kind of see he was kind of like, man, I'm just ready to be done with this draft and I'm off my way or whatever. But I saw a lot of good stashes in any event. Players get hurt, Van Jefferson, which a lot of people ain't really talking too much about. I think he got a potential heading into a contract year to do some good things for the Rams, getting that single coverage opposite of Cooper Kupp. So I definitely saw the value in that pick, taking him as wide receiver 80, whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, I just enjoyed the process from the beginning to the end. I thought this time around compared to last year was a better build for me because I know last year I got burned early and them first 2 picks, you get burned with them first 2 picks in this format, your season is over. Right. I had Lamar Jackson and Derek Carr, so case closed.
Yeah, Kyler Murray here
corner the market on backup LA Rams receivers there with Van Jefferson and Puka.
Which Puka, I believe that I shouted him out on that pick. That was a guy that I was targeting late as well. Puka, I think, is actually the better pick over Van because I think Puka presents a higher upside as the season
He was
progresses.
going a lot higher. I saw some drafts he was going round 16, round 17. So
guys, what about Ben Skoranek? There's no respect for
He
Ben
sucks, man.
It's Scaronic. Come on.
Breeze is apparently the Rams wide receiver whisperer.
He's the guru of Los Angeles Rams wide receiver depth
Fully
chart.
Rams receiver drafter here.
There's value on that team, man. They probably gonna be trailing a lot of games this year. There's value there.
That's the point. You get into this like quarterbacks and wide receivers. You really do want to target the teams that are going to be in negative game scripts and playing from behind a lot. So that's something to look at with the Rams for sure. There, Sid, Alex swinging back over to Waffle House. How did the live draft experience go? How did you feel about the first 10 rounds? How do you feel about how things followed after that?
Yeah, so it's always funny, like, you come in with an idea of what you want to do, but you can't make it that concrete because obviously live drafts, I think, are more susceptible to differences in values than you see typically on online drafts. And then you pair that with the fact that we didn't even know where we were drafting from going into the day. There's not, you can't really pigeonhole yourself to a specific strategy. So I came in with the idea I wanted to be in that 103, 104 area just because I wanted one of those top 4 value guys, one of those top 3 quarterbacks for Travis Kelce, and didn't even think Travis Kelce was going to get to me. So started that way, and it really kind of just derailed from there. I was just hanging on, hoping to find value where I could. So I feel like I got some balance to quarterbacks I just could not find a value for. And, so I didn't get my first quarterback till the 5th round with Russell Wilson, and then paired that with Stafford, later on in that 10th round, that last round of the live draft. So Breeze, I'm glad you're high on the Rams. It makes me feel good about having Stafford as long as he can stay healthy as QB2 there. But no, I mean, the live draft experience is so much fun. It's, growing up and, being a part of fantasy football and playing fantasy football growing up, you always wish you had that group of friends and stuff that you could go out and do a live draft. So having this opportunity now for the second year with the Scott Fish Bowl, it's always just a lot of fun, getting involved and meeting some faces that you see on Twitter and stuff. So
right.
No, overall, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic about my team. I like the balance. I had a strategy, didn't really go that direction, but we'll see what happens.
What's that?
Kudos to you. I was gonna say kudos to Alex. He finished. Did you finish top 200 overall last year? You're the highest finisher for all of our Atlanta drafts. Where did you finish overall last year? Do you remember?
I don't remember the exact number, but I made it to that semifinal round. So I think that's top 200. I think I was somewhere in that 160 area.
There you go. I wanted to know your favorite pick that you made on this roster and a pick that you hate someone else for hitting you on in this draft.
Yeah, my favorite pick is probably round 8, Brandon Ayuk. I'm a big Brandon Ayuk fan this year. I tend to think he's the better receiver between him and Debo, just from a football standpoint. I just love his route running, his ability to separate. And obviously there's quarterback questions of who's going to be the quarterback in San Francisco, but whether it's Lance or whether it's Brock Purdy, his separation is going to play regardless, So that was probably my favorite pick because I know the community as a whole is getting higher and higher on him. So to grab him in the 8th round felt good.
Yep.
Biggest, I didn't, I drafted Ken Walker as my RB3 in the 6th round, and that is my most skeptical pick because of the whole Zach Charbonnet. Obviously, they invested a lot in the passing offense here. With drafting Jackson Smith and Jigba as well. Geno Smith, I heard y'all prior to jumping on that y'all are thinking he might take a step back. I tend to agree. Mm-hmm. And it was on the back half of my 5-6 turn there, and I drafted Russell Wilson because I had to have that QB1. There's a tier break for me after that. And the next 3, I could have taken any of those 3 running backs and been happy. And that was Aaron Jones, J.K. Dobbins, Joe Mixon. And of course, out of those next 4 picks in between, all 3 of those went. So I kind of tilted, took Ken Walker, and, I don't love it, but I think that the scoring format of this year's Fishbowl really favors volume at the running back position, especially in the flex spots. I think with the running back position and the tight end position specifically tend to be more favorable in the flex position relative to like wide receiver, just because of the premiums that come with those positions.
Exactly. That's what I've pointed out. I pointed it out a lot during the live stream while I was in the Eagles' nest behind everyone that was drafting. Talking during the stream was that a lot of people are kind of overlooking the scoring format and how much it favors running backs and that volume, that 0.25 per attempt. That's something that a lot of people weren't really attacking in a lot of the drafts that I've seen on Twitter so far. But speaking of the live draft experience, we'll swing over to Emily. Your first live draft, was that correct?
Yeah, first live draft, and
how do you feel?
Nick was the one that kind of spurred me to come out. So thanks for like pushing me a little bit. I was nervous to come draft live, but it was a great experience. Really enjoyed like meeting everybody, and obviously always donating to charity is a good cause. So it was a great time. I think my draft, like I felt good about it. I kind of pivoted on Bryce Young. I didn't do like a whole lot of research on him going into it. I just kind of like pulled the trigger. I was excited about Christian Watson, obviously Derrick Henry in the second round. I think that was a little early with a lot of other drafts I was seeing, mock drafts I was seeing.
I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, really?
I like that. I like that pick where you got him. It's like what me and Nick were talking about earlier on the show is that volume specific, what he brings to that team, the way the scoring format is, absolutely. I think that's like definitely a hammer of a pick right there. He's gonna be a guy that
top 3 last year if he'd been healthy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think about like it could have been Barkley, right? But now with the news that just came out, like maybe that was a good decision. So I feel good about it.
So Emily, how did you? What was the drafts you've done? Obviously, they've been online. How did the live draft differ from some of the drafts you've done since you've been playing fantasy football?
Like in the Scott Fish Bowl specifically, I mean, like the group chats are always great. Like people are really nice, like in the group chats and stuff. But there's just like a lot more interaction. Like I just feel like I'm already having a lot of side combos going on, which is fun. And you just feel like you get to know people. I've been in a league this is my 12th year, our home league, and we always do it in person. Like no matter what, like people have moved like out of Nashville, but now coming back into the live. And I just like felt that again, like in the Scott Fish Bowl live draft. So it was really great.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the biggest thing we've preached for the longest time is the camaraderie and being able to get in the room with everybody and just have a good time. And I think that was really, I could definitely tell that everybody was having a great time, especially during the pre-draft shenanigans where Jeff was the race master when it comes to the horse races. I shared that
So
I shared the video on the Twitter account and doing our horse races to determine draft spots. Jeff, you have a knack for being a Kentucky Derby announcer, sir.
So I got to share this. So look, so when we did this last year back in 2022, I was coming down right to the last couple of days trying to figure out how we're going to actually have people pick their spots. And I mean, it was like within 24 hours that I figured out that I wanted to do like the 100-yard dash race and completely make it random. I thought about even going over to Good Game and doing some kind of competition. My thoughts were all over the board. And when I decided to do the 100-yard dash race, on a whim, I asked Jeff. I thought Jeff's got a good voice. Like, I just don't want to do this myself. Like Brandon's already on, like doing his thing. Like, Jeff, can you take this over? Like, yeah, absolutely. And he just ran with it. And like, Jeff's gonna be doing this. Jeff has a calling here.
I mean, it's I'm excited. Can't do it here. I'm not. We're gonna keep it kind of. You got to go watch the video. But I know last year when you tasked me to do it, the move was I think you wanted me to just call out who was getting the first pick, the second pick, the third pick, and I misunderstood the instructions. Is what happened.
He did not understand the assignment.
So I took the mic and it turned into just calling it like a horse race, and everyone loved it, and that's kind of how it took off. But hopefully I'm in for next year for the Fishbowl, and even if I'm not, I'll say it right here in front of all you guys and everybody else. Even if I'm not in the Fishbowl next year, I'll be happy to come down and call out the 100-yard dash again.
So you'll have to mark the in draft live and attend, even if I don't get selected. But got it. Okay,
Absolutely.
There you go.
Yeah, I need multiple options. We got to get Scott to update the code on that site.
Update the preferences when it comes to that. That's for sure. Oh, so just overall vibes, how things felt, just from the atmosphere and everything when it came down to it. Just good experience all the way around.
Absolutely. The Atlanta Live Draft is so much fun, and it's great actually getting to meet so many people there. And, it's fun doing some of the games, playing the trivia stuff, and just kind of, talking trash amongst ourselves a little bit too, Like there was a few guys on the Waffle House side where I was, we were side-eyeing each other a little bit during the draft. And, it's fun. It creates fun competition, and you get a couple little inside jokes. Like I know Breeze, he's still walking around with a limp from his 100-yard dash. He pulled up lame with a bad hamstring or that thing. And, but it's those little commonalities, those little inside jokes that kind of build the bonds, and that's what makes it so much fun.
As like I said, I was sitting back there at the end, what I called the Eagles nest during the draft. Was that tight end run happened right when I was talking about it during the stream. I wanted to take off one of my shoes and throw it. And I was so frustrated, but I had to kind of keep my composure during the stream. But I had a couple of those tight ends for at least a round, and then I was like, I'm getting one of these guys, and then boom, 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 falls apart on me, and I was ready to just come apart in there.
No, it's funny you bring that up, because when we got into the 5th round, and when Brandon took his tight end and then Derek took his tight end, I felt in my spirit it's about to be a tight end run. I got to take mine now before I miss out. So I went on ahead and took Waller.
Yep.
Then just to fast forward, when I listened to Brandon pod the next morning when it got to the 5th round, it made that pick so much more sweeter, knowing that he wanted this guy so bad.
Man.
He said it would have felt like heaven if he had got any one of them guys, Waller, Kittle, Goddard, but he had to settle with Ingram. But I took a lot of joy in that pick.
That definitely stung. I mean, I've got Waller as a top 5 tight end right now, so he just kept sticking around. I was like, ooh, man, if I can get this draft started and get Darren Waller, I think we're smooth sailing from here. And then that's a prime example. Live drafts, like, Emily, first live draft with Scott Fishbowl, live drafts and in person, like what Alex mentioned as well. Things can kind of fall apart in a given notice, and it's how you kind of manufacture the rest of your roster. Don't go on tilt. We've always talked about that. And just really, it's a little different in a live draft scenario when things start to kind of go haywire as opposed to online drafts. Wouldn't you agree, Nick?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that's been a little bit lost, though, in live drafts, especially with a format like this, I think the tough thing is everybody's working on the same set of rankings. You go on Sleeper. We're entering our picks in on Sleeper. I think it's a little bit more difficult because, I know I'm a big proponent, although I didn't have time to do it this year. I always usually come up with my own set of rankings and where I have guys, and I don't care whether other people have them ranked. Like, this is where I've got somebody ranked. It didn't really matter. But in a format like this, like, everybody's playing off of the same sheet. Like, everybody sees the top guy. So it's a little bit harder. It's a little bit easier in one regard to make sure, like, hey, I'm not missing on somebody, but it's a little bit harder too because everybody's playing off the same sheet, and it's a little bit harder to do. So I think that was one of the unique formats that we had, that if you or I are, for instance, entering the picks in online, it's a little bit different because everybody's sitting there on the Sleeper app and looking, well, this guy's supposed to go next. I guess I need to take him, kind of a thing. So it definitely adds that wrinkle. Right.
Yeah. It kind of tips your hand a little bit to a degree. That's kind of something me and you were talking about offline after the first 10 rounds were done. Is it gives a little bit more of a sight line for how some of the guys are going to start to kind of come off the board. So, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of really just wanted to get a few of you guys on here and talk about the experience and kind of just really touch base with everybody on how the drafts went. And I really kind of enjoyed having you guys on here to chit chat and share a few laughs. I appreciate it, though.
Happy to do it.
Yeah,
yes.
Definitely.
Very fun.
Yes, absolutely. Well, guys, we're going to let you go and put a wrap on the pod. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll talk.
Good luck to everybody this year. You'll need it comparatively to my team.
Good luck to everyone in the Coke division, for sure. But yeah,
I got this. We're winning this title.
We'll talk. We'll continue to talk through the group chats as we have at this point in time. But everyone have a good rest of the year evenings.
Before we go, can we got to get one thing out there. There's one thing we got to hit on.
Okay,
Alex, can you share in the Atlanta live draft your hair care regimen so we can all
good call.
Get you. I just feel like that's something we all need to be a part of right now. So,
well, you can't use it.
And he got it cut the other day too. So
yeah, it's a fresh
supposedly.
Cut. You can't use a 2-in-1. You need shampoo and conditioner separate. And then you gotta have a good product. I got a good product going.
You seem like a tea tree oil kind of guy, but we can talk more about that later.
I had Mark Owens with a whole bit about your hair, and you wore a hat, so he couldn't. Oh,
God, I had to back out of it last minute.
Busy morning.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail everybody. You guys have a great night.
Oh my goodness! All right, guys, we're gonna let you go. All right, see ya. All right, jumping back in, finishing up the pod here. It was good to have a few of those guys on. Yeah, no, that was an excellent time. Always good to talk to some of the people, especially after we got done doing live drafts with them. So, overall perception for you. I mean, we didn't really kind of touch on it with our two teams. I mean, I did post mine on Twitter. You posted yours on Twitter as well.
Sure.
How's your feeling?
Well,
how the team's shaping up?
Let me talk just a little bit about the Alive Atlanta draft. For I think unfortunately, me and everybody but me, you got to see a little bit of it this year compared to last year, but I'm stressed. Like, I've got a lot going on to make sure the draft is set up, make sure the venue's going good, make sure the boards are ready, make sure everybody shows up. So, I don't get to enjoy it as much as what I normally would. But it's a blast. I love setting up. I love bringing everybody together. I had two sticker people lined up, and of course only one showed. So I had to do stickers for a little bit, and that's just what comes with a live draft. But guess what? I still love it. I still felt like I had a good draft. Looking back on it, I don't think I would have had as good of a draft as I would have if I had somebody doing stickers for each of the groups. So as far as my actual draft, and by the way, thank you to Larry at Park Bench in the Battery, Atlanta. Larry's been a great friend for us, a great friend to me,
right?
But a great friend to our league, and letting us host our draft live there and for free the last 2 years for the Scott Fish Bowl. So thank you to him. I don't think he's a podcast person, or else I would send him this. But no, he graciously opened his bar up and his establishment for us to come in on off hours to be able to support him and his endeavors there. But for me, I drafted at the 9 pick. The aforementioned, we did a trivia competition to start. If you got 2 trivia questions right, you got to kind of pick your spot for the 100-yard dash. We ran the 100-yard dash, and then based on those results, you actually got to pick your spot from there. So the person who came in first on the 100-yard dash got to pick their spot they wanted. So if they want to pick number 3, they could get pick number 3, whatever spot that they wanted. So unfortunately, I came in second to last, so I got pick number 9, which is not a spot I wanted. I wanted Alex mentioned it. Unfortunately, Alex and I worked together. We're on the same team with the Braves. Last year, luckily for me, he was in your division, so we got to talk a lot of strategy. But this year, I couldn't talk anything with him.
Couldn't really give much to him.
Turns out we both wanted to be at that 3 or 4 spot, and that's kind of the spot I wanted to be at. Unfortunately, I could have been 9, 10, or 11, and I picked number 9. So I got Christian McCaffrey. Turns out I probably should have gone Justin Fields and Austin Eckler versus what I got was Christian McCaffrey and Deshaun Watson. Not a horrible start, not the amazing start. I think if I maybe wouldn't have been putting stickers up and things like that I would have done. Nonetheless, but where the draft really turned for me is the 3rd round. So I'd gone into it all along really wanting a quarterback and kind of getting quarterbacks in 2 out of the first 3 rounds is my thought. I punted that. And I remembered back to the last 2 years that I've done this draft. And I remembered that I didn't necessarily have to get that second quarterback early. I could get him late. So 2 years ago, I got Jared Goff and combined him with Carson Wentz, and one of those two every week led me to usually a top 10 performance. Last year, I got Daniel Jones in the 10th round, and I did the same. So I was at that spot. I was almost about to get quarterback, and I thought, pause.
Yeah.
You've done this the last couple of years. That is not the winning formula. I know that wide receiver is not the winning formula early either. So I've got to either go tight end or wide receiver. I looked at the running backs. I've done enough mock drafts to know that I can wait on the running back position and get enough of a guy in round 4 and round 5. I need to go tight end. So I went back to the Kyle Pitts well. And I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to be fruitful or not, but he's a guy that in this format, I think he can get the type of volume that can make a big difference. Post-type superstar too. I mean, he was going so high last year, and honestly, I think that's going to be the pick that's going to make or break me. If Kyle Pitts has the kind of year we expect him to have last year, this year, I'm going to do really good things. If he has the year that he had last year, which I cannot foresee happening, I'm going to be done. So
right, definitely a rebound candidate for sure with Kyle Pitts. I think that's something. If he's healthy, that was something that was not the case last year. He played injured a lot, missed some games. So that's, I mean, obviously he wasn't a guy that I had my eye on around the round that you took him in round 3. I mean, I was kind of building a little bit differently at that point in time, but
sure. You know, and I didn't know what those tight ends were going to do. You know, there's so many mock drafts that you see to where tight end, just like in your draft that you did, tight ends had a big, you know, go early. There was only 2 teams ahead of me that had gone tight end at that point. 3rd round reversal. You know, I've got a lot of picks to me, and you know, consequently, before it made it back to me in round 4, Dallas Goedert, George Kittle both went. And I'm sure in this format, Kyle Pitts would have been that guy. And I had him. He was my number 3 guy. I took him as the 4 in the format here. So I really hated. There he is. The man with a plan, Dan.
With the GOAT.
That's right, baby. You know it. I'm still a little sad that Dan last year made this amazing video hyping up the
travel too.
Afterward. And I asked him this year, you do it? He said, nah, I'm not doing it. I'm a little disappointed, man. I'm not gonna lie. Dan did an amazing job last year.
He punted tight end. Yes, he did.
Let's see. Where did Dan go? Dan, let's see. Where is Dan? Dan, there he is. Dan really punted tight end.
Yes.
Gerald Everett, Tyler Conklin, Zach. You know, Zach Ertz, though, like as late as you got him, though, in the 20th round, like I feel like you're not going to be horrible, though. But you got the aforementioned Jordan Love, who I think is a great pick, especially as a number 2. Great shot. So,
yes.
But overall feel, you know, my strategy coming into Fishbowl, you know, and unfortunately, I guess for Jeff, my strategy in this format is not to go wide receiver early. Going wide receiver heavy, I know that is the thing to do, and honestly, I'll probably do it in a lot of my drafts, but not in this format. For me, waiting on wide receiver is the key to winning. You can usually find a good wide receiver down a little bit later. Okay, thank you, Dan.
Do the Atlanta video next year.
But I think waiting on wide receiver is kind of the key. Loading up on receiver, quarterback, you know, running back. I think waiting on that wide receiver position is the way to win this draft. I think it's a way to win your league. I think it's a way to win overall. So that's my strategy. So I really hit on the wide receivers in those middle rounds late, and then took some shots at running back. So my quarterback, you know, backup, you know, I talked about it earlier. You know, I was in round 3. I was really thinking I had to get quarterbacks in 2 of the first 3 rounds, and I waited. So I think I got Kenny Pickett and Mac Jones. One of those 2 guys on a week-to-week basis, I feel like is going to be enough for me to compete. So at the end of the day, that's what it's going to be for me, and seeing if I actually do well or don't do well.
Yeah, that's definitely the thing. And you know, I've graded a few. Some followers have sent me in their drafts so far, and I've graded a few. And you mentioned, you know, the waiting on the wide receiver, and something that I preached during the live stream, and I've continued to preach while we've finished our drafts, is that it's just not the optimal draft for this particular scoring setup. And I think a lot of people are still just kind of confused, and like they've done underdog drafts up until this point, and there's wide receivers going left and right in these drafts, and So that's what they're accustomed to doing, and that's how they want to take this draft and go along with it. And I think that's where you see a lot of these different strategies and some of this. I mean, Eric Moody, works for ESPN. He posted his draft just yesterday or the day before, and he was like, everybody was astounded because he started his draft off. I think it was like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Tyreek Hill with 3 straight wide receivers. And then I was like, yeah, but look at the rest of his roster. I mean, he really he took a hit after the fact for starting out with those 3 straight wide receivers. Sure, you're going to look great on paper every single week, and you better hope that those guys are scoring 20 points or more every single week, because if they have an off week, the lack of depth and the lack of true value that you have at running back, quarterback, and tight end, it really comes to kind of bite you in the butt at that point in time. So I agree with you. That's not the optimal setup. I mean, I shared mine on Twitter. I'm not feeling. I feel less than confident, even though I have received some rave reviews for my draft.
I mean, I'm taking a look at your draft right here. I like the quarterbacks. I mean, you waited on your second quarterback till Carr in round 8. You got Brock Purdy in 11. I think that's a really good start there. I like your receivers. You and I have talked about this off air. I think you're the one thing, and it's this way in a lot of your drafts, is you usually are not as good at tight end. And you got Evan Ingram. You got
who's
Juwan Johnson,
paid. We talked about that.
Ferguson. We did talk about that, but I think your draft. I think your receiving room is good enough to compete. You got Saquon. We talked about him earlier. I think he's fine. I don't think you have to worry about him. Sure. Breece Hall, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook's going to go in at least in a situation where you can get some use out of him. In a shot opinion, I think you've got a good team. The only thing I would worry about, especially in this format and the value that tight end is, I think you need a little bit better spot at tight end. I think I would actually prefer to, and you and I talked about this last night, if Evan Ingram had not gotten paid, because I think he would be a little bit more hungry in going out. I think Evan Ingram is going to be a serviceable tight end. I personally don't view him as a top 12 option. That's me. You've got your opinion. But that's my opinion on Evan Ingram. With them adding Calvin Ridley, I think there's a lot of mouths to feed, and I would not be confident with him headed into the offseason here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I mentioned, I'm on the opposite side of that train with him getting paid. I think that they value him to be a part of that offense, and they're going to include him as such. I've got him ranked right now at tight end 8 heading into training camp, and that's all I'm asking for. Hey, finish 8th at tight end, 8th, 9th, 10th. And the way I've kind of built this roster around him, and even still, like I've mentioned, Juwan Johnson I've got ranked high. Jake Ferguson's a guy that he's taken over the Dalton Schultz role in the Cowboys offense. If that guy Jake Ferguson
Schultz last year, good Lord.
If Jake Ferguson gets, let's say, 3/4 of the targets that Dalton Schultz has gotten the last couple of years, I mean, I got him at tight end 26. That's tasty. I like that. I mean, you can't really argue with that. So, but with the rest of it, what I keep saying is my whole draft, I feel right now, hinges on how the running backs that I have play out.
Sure.
If they play out as expected, Saquon is Saquon. Dalvin Cook goes to the Dolphins. Let's cross our fingers on that, because that's why I drafted him, because that's the hope. If he goes to the Dolphins and takes over that number 1 role there and is Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, give me 75 to 80% of what Breece Hall was last year, another solid option, and then Rashad Penny to kick him in, a guy that's been one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL since coming out of college, just has to stay on the field. And if he stays on the field splitting time with DeAndre Swift, I think that's going to be – in that way that Philadelphia Eagles offense is, and how much they love to run the football, this is probably the best Scott Fishbowl team that I think I've put together post-draft.
Well, I don't know. I've seen what you've done in years past. I think, and I went back and looked, you finished last in your division and second to last overall in both Atlanta divisions. And I am confident enough to say that you will not be finishing in that same spot.
No.
Next year. So
you
drafted a much better team than you did last year.
Last year was the Kyler Murray killed me. and running backs were just horrible last year. And even my quarterbacks that I drafted after Kyler Murray were just turnover prone, and I was not getting a lot of points out of those guys on a weekly basis.
I had the same deal as you. I had Kyler Murray as my number one quarterback, but
I did not have Daniel Jones. So
my running backs got hurt too, but I still won the division.
Yeah, I did not have.
I won the division. I didn't go much beyond that. So
right, yeah. So I think this year I'm back in contention. Well, I think we're going to be sporting a possible division winning team right now, the way things are looking.
Okay.
We mentioned it like earlier. We were talking about how the boards are shaking out. We've talked about it offline. I've talked about it with you too, is how your draft felt like completely different from mine as far as player movement throughout the board. Running backs were gone where you were getting them in round 18, 19, or they were still there on the board. These guys were off the board in round 15, 16 in mine. So it definitely changes how I was kind of building the tail end of this roster. I think I adjusted appropriately. The very last pick of my draft, I got Matt Breida, which after today seems like a very, very heady, smart move to get my handcuff.
I think I'd rather have Eric Gray, but beggars
I think
can't be choosy. I'm sure they won't. I'm sure
Saquon,
if that happened.
I think if Saquon does miss week 1, I think they're going to lean more on Matt Breida right out of the gate than they will Eric Gray. Eric Gray's the guy to have long term throughout the season, but yeah, I think Breida will be the guy in week 1 if Saquon were to sit, and I still don't see that. That's just not.
Well, and you and I, especially in the last tail end of the draft, we're getting a lot of the same guys. Like you got Paris Campbell, Terrace Marshall. I was getting them 2 and 3 rounds later. Whereas a guy like, some of the few picks that you and I shared, one of the guys that I think at least late that I really like, just because of the injury risk of the guy ahead of him at the running back position, Tank Bigsby. I think he's a guy that's gonna see at least 40% of the snap share in Jacksonville, but with the injury history of Travis Etienne coming off a relatively healthy year last year, I think it's going to swing the other direction. I think he's a guy that could, if the tea leaves fall right, could be a league winner here, B.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of the guys you can draft as a kind of a later RB3 right now. I think he's more and more highly valued backup running backs as we head into training camp into the regular season. But I'll save that for another discussion and another podcast when we talk about running backs. So I think that's what we might do with the next episode. Is going to talk some running backs pre-training camp, get into the discussion on how that plays out, because I think that's one right now, especially with the news and how things have unfolded today and everybody's talking about the state of running back around the NFL. I think it's a good time to get into some discussion on the running back position.
FYI, it hadn't changed. It's not going to.
Yeah, it's not going to at all. GMs have definitely put their foot in the sand, and they're not moving. They're not budging. And I wouldn't expect it to change anytime soon either. So outside of that, any parting shots before we wrap this sucker up here?
Man, I just loved hosting the draft again here this year. Looking forward to hopefully growing into a third draft this next year, but it was just awesome, for you to come into town, for us to get to hang out, because usually, we only get to see each other these days a couple times a year. So it's just awesome you being able to come, being a part of everything live again this year, being able to see all these guys. I think we had 18 out of 24 were holdovers for last year at the live draft. So really good, just getting to see these guys again, keeping that relationship going live, continue that conversation throughout the rest of this year and the off season, just to know that, Atlanta and really even throughout the Southeast, there's one in Orlando. Okay, great. But this is the primo drafters in the Southeast. And it was just great to be able to have everybody in the same room, draft, be together, talk fantasy, and kind of have this. For me, it's the unofficial kickoff to fantasy football season. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely is. It's every year. Scott Fish Bowl is the absolute kickoff to fantasy football season. So I, of course, absolutely love coming down, doing the live stream for a second year in a row during the draft. So it's a tradition that I would like to kind of continue as long as we keep hosting this draft down there in Atlanta.
Unlike any other.
Yeah, so like I said, we were the first ones to ever do a live draft last year for the Scott Fish Bowl.
First ones to ever live stream it.
Yeah, first ones to ever live stream it. So I think it's a tradition that I would like to continue on with because it gives everybody that are it's doing the online drafts a real insight into how drafts are playing out. Get a good indication of how your leagues are going to be shaping up when you get your draft started. And so hopefully now that we're complete with our draft, and a lot of others are as well, hopefully you can take the information and kind of proceed through the tail end of your draft and come down the home stretch, so to speak, and put together a solid roster for the Scott Fish Bowl 13. So good luck to everyone out there. Like I mentioned, next podcast I want to get in here and talk about a little bit of running back, so we'll do that on the next one. So that will be on the next episode of Fantasy right here on rotoballer.com. Take it easy, guys.